I know that some of us are very enthusiastic about using scenarios, and once you get neck deep into it, it's very easy to kind of go in deeper and deeper, even though there is no requirement, or even though the content doesn't really lend itself to that kind of an approach. So the best practice for scenarios is just keep them simple and manageable. If you find yourself getting hopelessly lost in it, you can be totally sure that the learner is going to find themselves uh, lost as well. And again, to make sure that the content, the scenarios content is compelling and engaging, we need to capture the real problems and decision points that the learner is likely to face in their everyday work. Now, this is something that happens on the job. On the job training is a lot about facing a real problem, and then finding that probably what you learned about the subject was not adequate enough, and then you check with your peers, you check with your supervisors and so on what is the best thing to do. Now, if we could mirror those situations and build scenarios around them, you're giving the learner a chance to really learn and apply and take the best decisions that they would take in their everyday jobs. Now, another thing is to create believable distractors. I think this applies to any kind of assessment. Sometimes the right answer is such a dead giveaway that it seems like a waste of effort to build the assessment in the first place. So it's very important that we build believable distractors. And as I mentioned earlier, since this is a risk-free environment, you can create scenarios without the learner being fearful of the implications of their decisions. And one quick way of making scenarios is you can use existing case studies, and you can identify the various points at which the learner would have to take decisions and create scenarios. And in fact, you could take this to several levels of decision making, as we would do with branching scenarios. And again, one of the best practices is to use characters that the learners can relate to, because no matter how wonderfully put together the scenario is, if the learner finds that they cannot relate to the characters, then you've just lost them. So this is a very simple but effective best practice, which will make your training come alive. A few more best practices. For customer-specific business scenarios, which are probably outside of your domain, it is very imperative that we get help from the subject matter experts, because I think we found the hard way that sometimes we've developed complex scenarios and then send them to the SME only to find that they are not something that the learner would encounter in the first place. So it is important to get to work collaboratively with the SME when we are developing trickier or complicated scenarios. And another best practice is, as I mentioned earlier, first create your blueprint outside of PPT. So the design is more important, or probably needs more of your effort and time than the actual development, because once you get into the development stage, it's just a matter of following and executing all those decisions that you took. And another best practice to keep in mind when we're talking about branching scenarios is that we need to make sure that the learner doesn't hit a dead end. So even if they take the wrong decisions, there should be some way for the learner to loop back to the original decision point where you can then give feedback. And fortunately, there are many authoring tools which have branching scenario templates, and vendors who have experience in using them. So it might be worthwhile to explore, even though you may not be doing the development yourself. It may be worth it as instructional designers, as training managers, to kind of get acquainted with what is out there, what are the capabilities of the tool that you intend using when it comes to developing scenarios.